Greetings dear viewers, this is George from Ireland, and this video is why Enoch was wrong. It used to be a slogan amongst those who opposed immigration to the United Kingdom to say Enoch was right, and these people were often right-wingers. Now, I'm a right-winger, and I've long believed that Enoch was wrong, and did I publish an article with that very title, so I'm not making it up just now. Anyway, it's half a century since Enoch Powell's notorious Rivers of Blood speech. So I don't want to go over too much about who Enoch Powell was, conservative politician of the 50s to the 70s, then also unionist. On the 20th of April 1968, he gave a speech in Birmingham, his birthplace, about excessive immigration. And he said, like the Roman, I'm filled with foreboding, I see the Tiber foaming with much blood. Now, he's the textbook example of someone who was clever but unwise. He didn't realise that most people are not as well-read as he is, a classical scholar. He was quoting from the Aeneid. It's a Latin epic poem, and the expression "foaming, the Tiber foaming with much blood" was simply to indicate his sense of anxiety, not because he actually thought anyone was going to be killed. That was the only allusion to the speech which could be seen as a violent imagery. So he was very foolish to pick that expression, because that's the one which has stayed in the mind and it's echoed down the decades. So J. Enoch Powell, he was against large-scale immigration from Commonwealth countries, particularly happening from Jamaica, India, Pakistan, Barbados, and so forth. Less so from African countries. Although some say Kenyans moving in, they're often Asian Kenyans. Now, Enoch Powell was often said to be racist. He said that non-white people could become British, but it was difficult in his view. He didn't believe that ethnic groups were better than each other. He thought Indians in some respects were racially superior to white Britons. He said so. He was filled with the greatest admiration for Indian civilization and erudition. And he said that large-scale immigration would change the United Kingdom very significantly. That latter point is definitely true, but it doesn't have to be bad. Could be good, could be neutral. Now, the United Kingdom would certainly change other parts of the world radically, but he didn't accept this as a corollary of imperialism. So I just think it's partly a post-colonial responsibility. Anyway, some people develop very close links to the United Kingdom. It's right for the UK to welcome reasonable numbers of them in. And indeed, some of these immigrants from the Commonwealth came because they were invited. The British government advertised jobs abroad, particularly for the National Health Service. When he was Health Secretary, he recruited nurses from the West Indies. Anyway, there was a labour shortage in the United Kingdom at the time. This was a time when there was more emigration than immigration, more people going out than coming in, going to places like Canada, Australia, the United States. And again, it's bitterly ironic that Powell should seem to approve of his anonymous constituent who wanted his children to settle abroad. That was being an immigrant, and yet that same person was fulminating against immigration. So was Enoch Powell racist? It's difficult to say, because he didn't want racial discrimination by law, but then again he was against laws which would have banned racial discrimination. He said people should be allowed to make their own arrangements. Obviously, we do need these sort of laws. Think back to the times when people, because of their colour, would refuse accommodation. Someone would say, I'm not going to rent a room to you because you are black, or let you dine at this restaurant, blah, blah, blah. Until the 60s, that was permitted by law in the United Kingdom. It's shocking now. Powell had no objection to interracial marriage, incidentally. He didn't dislike people of other races on a personal level, and had fairly good relations with some of the Afro-Caribbean community in his constituency until about this time. But because of Powell, children were verbally abused and occasionally hit by their schoolmates. Now, he never encouraged anyone to commit any act of violence, but based on this rhetoric, some hotheads and bigots did commit violent crimes, and all the way up to murder. I think it would be unfair to try and hold Powell even indirectly responsible for murder. What was going on at the same time was large-scale immigration from the Republic of Ireland, where I'm from, in the United Kingdom, and Powell hadn't a word to say about that, pro or con. So, which makes me think, is that racist then? Because we're white, he didn't raise any objection to us moving in. Or say Polish people who come to the UK in the 40s, he had nothing to say about that. So I think Powell was wrong. There wasn't such large-scale immigration in the 60s. In many ways, it's very beneficial. It was needed for the economy. which is not to say that one has to support all immigration at all times of any number of people in any circumstances. What I favour is a small amount of selective immigration, choosing people as their individuals for their qualifications to fill gaps in the labour market, and obviously giving them a path to citizenship after about 5 years. That's it, not discriminating for or against any nationality. So I don't know what the magic number of immigrants would in the UK would be. Something like 100,000, that was the Conservative proposed limit. It seems about right to me. I don't know. It's hard to remember that it's only in the early 90s that it flipped. More people started to come in to the United Kingdom than to go out. Because from the Second World War, for about 50 years, more people have been going abroad than have been coming in. What else? Why was Powell against people from the new Commonwealth coming to live in the United Kingdom? Partly for the cultural changes it would bring, and it doesn't really bother me, I'm a cosmopolitan. And partly he claimed their behaviour was bad. He attributed all sorts of crimes to them and had nothing positive to say about them, that they were benefiting British society. He thought that was bad news as well. Using the word pickaninnies about black children, which is certainly demeaning. Racist? Certainly now it would be regarded as racist. In 1968, arguable. So it's difficult to say. I know he's a hate figure for many on the left. He was absolutely abominated by them, and he found it very difficult to speak anywhere after that. Large numbers of irate protesters would try and prevent him getting into a hall. There's some footage of Exeter University in the 70s where he's speaking on the stage, and there are dozens of protesters on the stage being as disruptive as possible to try and prevent him getting his message across. So that was Edward Heath, not Edward Heath, that was Enoch Powell. He was dismissed by Edward Heath in the Shadow Cabinet for making that speech. When he died in 1998, Edward Heath was asked to comment on the passing of a titan, J. Enoch Powell, and he declined to say anything because I suppose he didn't want to say anything critical of someone who had just passed away. Others say, oh well, if Heath had died first, Powell would have found it in himself to say something complimentary. Blair found some kind words to say for Powell because of his tenacity and the sincerity of his opinions. So that was Enoch Powell. There wasn't too much immigration in the 60s. Immigration has not been an entirely good thing. In some ways it's been splendid, in some ways it's been bad. That's largely been a matter of individuals, sometimes a matter of numbers, and it was certainly wrong at the time. He quoted his constituents saying, in 15 or 20 years' time, the black man will have the whip hand over the white man in this country. That was predicting so by 1988 it would be like that. Now, one shouldn't consider racial relations in terms of racial conflict. It's not like that. It certainly doesn't have to be like that. And it's preposterous to suggest that by the late 80s, the black community or all non-whites together were in any way dominant. By that stage, they would have been perhaps 5% of the population. And we don't have to be trying to master each other, be cruel to each other. So yet again, it was another inflammatory expression that as a responsible and intelligent person, he ought to have chided his constituents, said that, and reassured him and things like this. So some of these people who moved to the United Kingdom in the 50s and 60s had been in the British military in the 50s and 60s, and there's no question they had the absolute legal right to come until 1971 when it was changed. And again, it's a curious coincidence that this whole Windrush immigration scandal should come to a head on the 50th anniversary of Powell's speech, because now some of these people who came from the Commonwealth to the UK at that time never had their immigration status clarified. It was said, yes, they had indefinite leave to remain after 1971, as in a permanent right to stay if they'd already come by 1971, but a document to that effect wasn't issued, and now some of them are facing attempts to deport them, and some of them have been in the UK for over 50 years. Some people were even born in the United Kingdom, which didn't automatically confer British citizenship. So the government is trying to sort out, regularise the situation. And incidentally, I think it would be grossly unfair for anyone of this Windrush generation, unless he or she has done something heinous, to be removed. Yes, they should certainly be allowed to stay. So that's Enoch Powell, who got it desperately wrong. Was it a cynical ploy to try and seize the leadership from Edward Heath? It's difficult to say. Powell did later stand for the leadership of the Conservative Party, and he got nowhere. Well, that is Enoch Powell. Enoch Powell was desperately wrong, and what he wanted to happen, as in re-immigration, large numbers of ethnic minority people leaving the UK, is not going to happen. The UK is going to be more and more racially mixed. In a century or two, there'll be a non-white majority, which will be neither bad nor good. But I embrace multiracial Britain, and on a very intimate level too.